Good evening, everyone, and aloha. Thank you for joining us for our conversation on Ahupuaʻa approaches to energy systems. My name is Rachel James. I work as a staff attorney at the Hawaiʻi Public Utilities Commission, a role I moved into following my time at the William S. Richardson School of Law, where my studies focused on energy justice, environmental law, and Native Hawaiian law. Our panelists today are Keani Rawlins-Fernandez, Eric Enos, and Walter Ritte. Each of these individuals are people whom I hold in high regard. Their trailblazing Kanaka-centered advocacy has informed much of my practice and perceptions. I'm honored to serve as your moderator for what I'm certain will be an incredible panel. Our discussion this evening will focus on shifting to an equitable, climate-resilient energy grid, an energy grid that is rooted in cultural values and place-based expertise, and one that meets the unique needs of individual communities. Our panelists will take us on a deep dive to help us better understand Ahupuaʻa-based resource management and how this approach can inform our use of renewable energy. Keani, Uncle Eric, and Uncle Walter will each provide insight on how we might better answer the question, what would our energy system look like if we individually and collectively held our energy resources like wind, solar, and water as sacred gifts meant to be stewarded as public trust resources. And with this vision in mind, our panelists will explore what our individual kuleana is in achieving an equitable energy ecosystem. As you can see, we have some hefty questions to address, and we have the benefit of the amazing hearts and minds of our panelists from across the ʻāina to inform and enhance our understanding on this learning journey. I am very much looking forward to you experiencing their passion and their mana'o. First, however, I'd like to thank the grassroots community hui who worked alongside the Sierra Club to create this event, which is meant to be an independent complement to the Hawaii Energy Conference. As the host of this Facebook Live event, the Sierra Club is taking bold action to ensure that diverse perspectives and alternatives are a part of the mainstream conversation during the Hawaii Energy Conference. This event's collaborators believe that we are in an urgent transition to renewable energy, and that now is a prime opportunity to bring grassroots community voices together and to support those voices being at the forefront of electric energy development decisions. A couple of housekeeping items before we start. The format of the panel will begin with a slightly presentational approach as our panelists share their mana'o. Then we will move to a guided talk story component where I will pose a few questions to our panelists. Before we end though, we'd like to include questions from our Facebook Live audience as well. So feel free to submit your answers as we go along. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can. We do, however, only have an hour, so I'll ask your forgiveness in advance if we don't quite reach your question. And at this time, I've taken up enough of that hour already, so let's jump right in and get this party started, shall we? We have the pleasure of first hearing from Keani Rawlins-Fernandez. Keani is the current vice chair of the Maui County Council and is a graduate of the Hawaii Alliance for Progressive Action's Kuleana Academy. She was born and raised on Molokai and has dedicated her life's work to protecting and serving the islands, her community and culture through aloha ʻāina stewardship. Throughout her career, she has supported initiatives that prioritize environmental protection, education, food sustainability, affordable housing, and smart development. She is also a mother of two incredible keiki. Please join me in welcoming Keani.
Mahalo, Rachel. Aloha, everyone, and mahalo to the Sierra Club for hosting tonight's and tomorrow night's panel discussion on energy. It's such a privilege to be on this panel this evening with our practitioners and community champions. So in this first slide, I was tasked with setting the foundation for this evening's panel discussion. And it took me some time to really challenge myself into blending the two and articulating how it looks and how it'll work. And the first thing I thought is ikawa ma mua, ikawa ma hope. Our future is in the past. Seeking guidance from the past to inform our future has been a tried and true practice for millennia. The practice of kilo and connecting with our ʻāina has been refined again and again over generations, each time adjusting as the physical and political climates change. Improvements are made, collective growth takes place, and striking a balance of interdependence and independence, especially when it comes to systems thinking, cultivating abundance and aloha ʻāina consciousness. Next slide, please. The Ahupuaʻa is the perfect model for a systems approach to management. The first thing people often think of when thinking of Ahupuaʻa is land divisions, a way of ensuring resources are provided to the benefit of everyone. Often from Mauka to Makai, but not always. There are also ili and lele that are associated with specific Ahupuaʻa to complement the natural resources for the community, to establish social, economic, and political balance throughout the moku, mokupuni, and paiaina. A konohiki or a li'i was carefully chosen so that it wouldn't be more than what that konohiki could handle in managing. And resource management was place-based. Ahupuaʻa management was not only land divisions, it also served as a mindset of collective survival, collective stewardship. This mindset fostered proactive thinking, not just reactive, in exploring and experimenting, looking for the best outcome for everyone. For this reason, techniques of reforestation, permaculture, aquaculture were developed to cultivate more vai-vai than would have occurred without human partnership. Techniques of planting the understory in the forests of lo'ikalo that maximize aquifer recharge, in turn maximizing outputs to the punawai and groundwater discharge along the shoreline, creating the perfect environment for limu to grow in lokoi'a and along the shoreline that would feed the baby fish. Intentionally adding value for subsystems downstream. Each microsystem played an important role in the macrosystem. The Ahupuaʻa was a demonstration of the understanding that everything is connected, that in a system that's balanced, where care and compassion for our home and each other is practiced and integrated into systems for ensured survival. And ultimately, the recognition that this ʻāina is what feeds us, biologically, emotionally, and spiritually. That while humans can maximize abundance, the ʻāina doesn't need humans for her survival, but we surely need her for our survival. And for that reason, the ʻāina is chief. Next slide, please. The energy, electricity, and therefore the internet has become essential for survival, akin to water is life. For those who rely on healthcare for survival, such as for dialysis, to help with sleep apnea, etc., electricity is what's keeping them alive. Particularly after this pandemic and transitioning from in-person to online, so much of our day-to-day life in work, education, healthcare, and that those without electricity were often left out, and that should never happen. The Ahupuaʻa mindset of cultivating abundance for the benefit of everyone must be applied to the cultivation and distribution of energy, ensuring equity and equality in distribution, democratizing the systems versus a corporate monopoly. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, stay on this slide. I forgot that we merged the two slides. And so why does this matter? Why is it important that the Sierra Club hosts a panel like this to challenge us to think through the Ahupuaʻa system and that mindset and the energy system that's our reality today? Conversations like these matter and are critical in reminding communities that what we have accepted as normal today wasn't always what's been, nor what always must be. While electricity may have not existed I ka wā hope, the systems thinking was. It was integrated into all aspects of life. Systems thinking is part of our people's DNA. It is our culture and heritage. The Ahupuaʻa system of malama, hoʻomomona, and aloha aku, aloha mai reciprocity must be applied to contemporary society. This is about justice. And as the famous Cornel West accurately stated, justice is what love looks like in public. And right now, I don't see a whole lot of love electrified through the grid. How appropriate and relevant to have this conversation as the cost of electricity increase by 10, 25% due to forces outside of our control. Forces which would not have impacted us the same way had we built renewable green systems when the community had asked years ago. That it took legislation to force the hand of the monopoly that controls our energy system. This abuse of power is not new. When appointing a konohiki or a li'i, and that leader was to be qualified and equipped for the task of managing. I ka wā hope, if the leader was greedy at the expense of the welfare of people, where people died from mismanagement or abuse, the ali'i was removed or killed. I keia manawa, we may not be killing leaders, but they must be held accountable. And it's about all of us working together to return the management of what we can handle, decentralizing power, looking into the development of more microgrids and nanogrids, return to a system that benefits everyone, not just a few, return to a system that doesn't hurt our ʻāina. In remembering that in Ahupuaʻa systems thinking, there is value added for those downstream. And who are our downstream users? It's the next generation. And ultimately, I ka wā hope, it was the people together who determined their future. It's never too late to redesign a system that better serves everyone. And I'll end there. Mahalo, Rachel.
Mahalo, Keani. And I'm listening to you and I'm like, wow, she's dropping Cornel West. And I was like, and then she's talking about overthrowing systems and killing people. I realize that's not where we landed on entirely, but I appreciate you introducing that breadth of consideration. And with that, I will introduce Uncle Eric Enos, who is a lifelong resident of Waiʻanae and is the co-founder and executive director of Kaʻala Farms Incorporated, a Waiʻanae-based community organization that has operated the Cultural Learning Center at Kaʻala for nearly 3 decades. He is deeply involved in the perpetuation of Waiʻanae's cultural and ancestral traditions, like taro farming, as well as the management, care, and restoration of the land and sea. Please welcome Uncle Eric Enos.
Hello, everybody. Can you see me and can you hear me?
Yes, to both.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's an honor to be here, and aloha to Uncle Walter Ritte. He's one of our folk heroes from way back with Anti-Frenchy Gang, and remember him coming back from Ko'olave, and he was wearing a double layer of slippers with long tea leaf tongs in his slippers when they evacuate him and they pull him off of Ko'olave. But anyway, so you can frame the question, what do you want me to talk about? I guess we just laid a context of our learning center at Kaʻala. We're in the back of Waiʻanae Valley. Brought down the water in 1978, and the government said no, and we said yes. And so the rest is history. And we're totally off the grid, and we're trying to figure it out. And we also ended up inheriting the other half of the valley, 1,100 acres, gross mismanagement of land by the government. So anyway, we're talking about energy. So what do you want me to address?
Uncle Eric, is that, I mean, well, you're welcome to share what you would like, but definitely interested in how some of the concepts that Keani introduced in terms of Ahupuaʻa thinking, how you're perpetuating some of that there at Kaʻala Farms, and bringing those concepts to life in real time, in modern times.
Yeah, we've been trying to figure it out for the last, I don't know, what is 1976, we started working with the alienated youth. But, you know, I mean, we have all our mountains, all our forests, all our watersheds needs to be back in community control. And what does that mean? Yeah, food, water, shelter, medicine, fibers. And of course, energy is the base of all what we do, you know, whether it's, and to power up our modern world, but also to know that if energy fails, we can figure it out. I mean, we can go back to some of the natural resources and we can still feed ourselves and house ourselves. And I know that's not true for 90% of the people in the Hawaiian Islands, but at least we can start to say, you know, how are the sources of our energy and what are they, you know? And we start with water, and we start with you know, the land itself, and then people, and then try to figure out how to keep all those things in balance. We are trying to develop a microgrid, you know, because we have water, we can use hydro. We have, of course, Waianae has sun, and it has sun, and it has sun. Every bit of green that you see up at Kaʻala has an artery to it, a water line to it, which you brought down. Yeah. So otherwise, it's a desert. So Waianae is in the middle of a desert, and then of course the biggest energy we have is people power and youth power. And so how do we connect those pieces and get our youth involved in these issues of energy, water, waste, shelter? You know, these are all the future challenges our youth will face, and they have to step up and they have to become our future scientists, our future botanists, our future hydrologists. We gotta tap that resource of people and our youth and the ike that comes from the past and the traditions of our past. So that kind of sums it up. You know, other than that, I'm not quite sure what you want me to address, and I'm kind of more interested in hearing what the others have to share too, and then I can and you know, I can react to that.
Well, thank you for jumping in with those pieces of knowledge. We also look forward to what the other panelists have to say. And so we'll move on to Uncle Walter Ritte at this time, and we'll come back around for some talk story with everyone after he shares. So thank you, Uncle Eric. Uncle Walter Ritte is a Native Hawaiian activist and educator from Ho'olehua, Molokai. He is the founder of ʻāina Momona, a nonprofit organization created for the purpose of supporting grassroots communities to restore fragile ecosystems, promote cultural rights and practices, enhance community well-being, and advocate for Native rights and social justice. Uncle Walter has been a pillar of social activism in Hawaii for over 40 years, beginning with the demilitarization of Kaho'olawe in 1976. His accolades run long, but I'll let him share what he would like to share with you all this evening. Uncle Walter, thank you for being here.
Yes. First of all, aloha to all of you. And I'm really excited about talking about the Ahupuaʻa system. I think that the more we talk about that system, the better chance we have of surviving here in Hawaii. We've been managing our lands sideways, you know, along the shoreline. DLNR manages the ocean, then another group manages the top of the mountains. And we're not managing our lands from the top to the bottom via the Ahupuaʻa system, which is a system that our ancestors used in order to survive on little dots in the middle of the Pacific. So the more we talk about the Ahupuaʻa, the more chance we have of survival. So in our efforts on Molokai to develop Ka'amola Ahupuaʻa, we began talking about, first of all, keeping the soil at the top of the mountain from running down into our fish ponds and onto the reefs. That was the first major problem that we had to solve. And we started from the bottom. We started taking care of our fish pond first, and then trying to reestablish the fish ponds, making them be able to feed our families. And then every time there was a storm, we were threatened by the soil coming down from the top of the Ahupuaʻa. So now we're concentrating our efforts to try and figure out how to stop that soil from coming down onto our fish pond and how to stop that soil from going onto our reefs. So first of all, we're talking about being able to survive. And we talked about, okay, we need to farm not only the fish pond, but we need to farm the lands next to the fish pond. And then we need to figure out how we're going to keep the side of the hills from running into all of these areas that we're farming. To tell you the truth, energy is like not a really high priority for us in trying to develop this Ahupuaʻa, because we have electric lines that we depend on in order for us to be on this Zoom with all of you and stuff like that. And I'm really glad that we're now putting energy as part of something that we're going to have to figure out. And the worst thing we've done as humans in these little dots on islands in the middle of the Pacific is we're wasting. We're wasting our land, we're wasting our water, and we're wasting our energy. So I know that we talked about water, wind, and energy as being part of the public trust. So we are, as citizens, trying to figure out how to protect these things. So we have a water commission, and we've been really active in that here on Molokai. In fact, they actually helped us stop the dam on one of our rivers. In fact, tomorrow we're going to go up there and try to figure out why we don't have to take our sledgehammers out there. We're going to just figure out how to stop the water from going in those pipes and make sure that the water goes back into the riverbed. And as far as wind, we've had many battles on Molokai because people wanted to make wind into energy, which is fine, but they wanted to make like a farm so that the energy can be transported to Oahu, where they don't have enough land to make enough energy for their uses on Oahu. And on Molokai, that created quite a stir. We had a big battle to try and stop them from turning Molokai into a wind farm for the people on Oahu. So that goes to the point of talking about energy and how to use it properly, and not even waste it. And later on, I'll talk a little bit more about that part. My son always tells me that the reason we waste water is because we're always making it so cheap. We use it to wash our cars and water our lawns instead of growing food. And he talks about energy in the same way, and saying that we need to make energy a little bit more expensive so that we stop wasting it. So those are really outlandish kinds of ideas, but it goes to the point of how we're using all of these natural resources that we have and how we're misusing those resources and how we're wasting those resources. And I'll stop there for now.
Mahalo, Uncle Walter. I'm curious if you'd like to chat a bit about resource sovereignty, or if you wanted to share that a little bit later in our discussion as well.
Yeah, I'll wait for later on.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. So we'll stop sharing screen now, and we'll get on to gallery view so you can see us all, and we'll just have a little bit of talk story here. So thank you again, Uncle Eric, Uncle Walter, and Keani. We'll start with some questions that we have, and then I encourage our audience to send questions as well. We look forward to hearing what you're interested in, but we'll start what we have prepared. We'll start with what we have prepared now. So Keani, if you don't mind, I'll start with a question for you. And the question is, how can policy, lawmakers, government agencies, and developers support adopting a framework for an Ahupuaʻa energy system design?
Mahalo for the question, Rachel. So it starts with conversations like these, right? What would each community like to see? For Molokai, it was community-owned and community-managed renewable energy that complements our way of life, that doesn't contaminate our ʻāina, that isn't being shipped from, halfway across the planet. And for those interested, there'll be more discussion on that tomorrow night's panel. But in determining the goals and objectives of each community, what is compatible, then we looked for partnerships. In working toward achieving the creating our co-op first, and then applying for the CBRE renewable energy program. The community stood up for itself when rules of the games were being written that made it harder for the community to be able to compete. And in going through those channels, meant to protect the community, like the Public Utilities Commission. And I can't stress enough how important it was to have people on the PUC that weren't just doing the bidding of special interest groups and really had an ear and a heart for the community, and ensuring that balance for the business interests, but also for the community. And so there's been a lot of successes on Molokai that I'm super proud of. But I think for lawmakers, policymakers, government agencies, for me, it really helped a lot to be working shoulder to shoulder with our community in advocating when needed, and in supporting in as many ways as possible, and connecting our community to being that facilitator. But there's also policies that are creating barriers, and so most of those policies are at the state level. So as a council member, I can help to advocate, but I don't have like a direct vote. But policymakers can support our communities by also providing resources. And that's one way on the county that I've been able to support our community in advancing their goals and objectives.
Thanks so much, Keani. I actually, I heard you on the radio this morning, so I was like very excited to be on this panel. I was like, she's so famous. But I'm commenting just to thank you for your continued support to bring resources to the community. And I appreciate that you mentioned that, and I'm just thrilled with your success in that endeavor. But some of the things you raised brought to mind just some of the conversation that Uncle Eric was having in talking about really needing to get youth involved and to have advocates, and you're needing these different people, these various components. And so part of the conversation is definitely getting government agencies and lawmakers to engage with community. And so Uncle Eric, thinking about that, I'm curious, what happens when community members aren't so interested in engaging? I think in some instances, communities have been burned. They're not totally jazzed about engaging more with government. In other instances, perhaps they're not totally burned, but maybe they don't have the capacity to engage. So I'm curious some of your thoughts on the responsibility of community members and what's reasonable and how do they get involved?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I will take our lessons from Molokai, because out in Hawaiʻi, we're sort of like an island in and of itself, because Hawaiʻi has been so isolated. And so we have to think independently as a moku, yeah. So yeah, I think the work really has to be done at the education level, the school level, and starting to create awareness, because it's hard for adults in our area. Hour and a half one way to go to work, hour and a half the other way. They're 3 hours on the road on a good day, and so they're exhausted. All the money goes to gas, car, and so it's so that really makes it tough for families to take on these issues. Just want to come home and figure it out. But it's our job in the community to figure out how to make the Ahupuaʻa really work, in terms of where all the land is, where the water is, where the skills is, where the investment dollars is, so that we can start investing in our own resources and creating the kind of energy resources we need. It's the distribution of wealth, and how that wealth is distributed for, how much of our budget goes into the military, how much of it goes into different parts, and how much wealth. I mean, I'm not picking on the military, but just that's the only jobs for our kids, is because that's a guaranteed job. So can we try and flip that around? And what if we had resources for like being able to subsist, and ways that we can start using the land and the water? Because since we import 80% of our food, that's $1 billion industry. So but then land is so expensive. So what's wrong with that picture? There's a lot of idle land, there's a lot of idle people, and there's water in them hills, and we have to learn how to use it wisely. It's like water and energy go hand in hand, and the byproduct is waste. But can we rethink that waste? Yeah. So anyway, there's so much to talk about, but I'll stop there.
I appreciate what you shared. And your conversation about resources and just really the management of them and understanding people resources really has me thinking about what we define in the state constitution as our public trust resources. So Uncle Walter, I'm just going to read a snippet and then I have a question for you. The snippet is from the Constitution. You'll have to forgive me. My lawyering thing is kicking in and I'm just wanting to get the verbiage right. So I'll read it verbatim. But in terms of conservation and development of resources, our Constitution says that for the benefit of present and future generations, the state and its political subdivisions shall conserve and protect Hawaii's natural beauty and all natural resources, including land, water, air, minerals, and energy sources, and shall promote the development and utilization of these resources in a manner consistent with their conservation and in furtherance of the self-sufficiency of the state. So with that mouthful, I am very interested in your thoughts, both around resource sovereignty, but also in thinking about energy resources in this public trust kind of framework and concept. Oh, Uncle Walter, we cannot hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, thank you.
Us old guys, we always forget to turn on the mute. Yeah, it was a mouthful that you just presented to me. So I'm not quite sure how the hell I'm going to answer that one, but I want to go back to what I always want to talk about, which is the Ahupuaʻa. And what struck me was what Eric just said about spending 3 hours a day in your car just to provide for your family. And I remember some of my classmates who lived in Eva even used to say that they used to go to work in their car when it was still dark, and then when they came home it was dark, so they didn't even know what was in their yard. And that's a hell of a lifestyle that we've created for ourselves. And right now on Molokai, we're trying to develop the Ahupuaʻa. But we just started with fish ponds, and then you begin to realize that you cannot really develop isolated units like that, because yeah, you can fix all the walls and stuff, and then when there's a rainstorm, all the mud come in and kill all your baby fish. So you got to start thinking about what the Hawaiians were thinking about, which is Malka Makai, and all the way out into the reef and all the way up into the forest and even up into the sky in order for us to survive. So in all of that, you have all of the elements. You know, you have the wind, you have the rain, you have water, you have land, all of those things. And if we don't manage all of those things, whatever, all those fancy words that we have in our constitution or legal briefs, they get translated mostly by lawyers coming out of UH Law School, which had been saving our okolis all of these years, allowing us poor guys to survive by using the law in order to protect these things that we want to protect. So they go hand in hand. We might not understand all of the legal jargon, but we understand what it takes to survive. And when we get together with the lawyers and they actually come out of law school and not just go to those high-rise lawyer places that they go to make sure that more development gets done the cheapest way for these developers. But they come out of, while they're in school, they're actually coming out into the Ahupuaʻas, they're coming out to Molokai, they're going to ʻāina. When they finish law school, they're not just going to these offices, they're going out into the community. And once they talk to us and we talk to them, then we start getting a lifestyle that we can survive in, because now we're going to protect the water that we need. Now we're going to protect the land that we need and all of those things that we never knew how to protect. We just knew how to go out on the street with just signs and start yelling at politicians for not doing their job. So these things are coming around, and we're getting a really good relationships now with people who can define those terms that you just gave, you read out to me, which I cannot define. Sorry about that, but I know that we got to survive. And I know that Eric and his gang got to survive. You know, if there's no vai in Waianae, then there's not going to be any mullet. So we got to make sure that those two things connect to one another again. Same here on Molokai. And when it gets to energy, we don't think much about it because we just turn the switch on. But I remember one day when I went to Oahu to go to a meeting with the whale sanctuary, and it was on the 3rd floor. So before we could get to the meeting, we had to wait for the elevator. And I started to try and go up the stairs, but everybody said, no, you take the elevator. So, okay, take the elevator. So instead of walking up the stairs, we took the elevator. Got out of the elevator, I wanted to go to the bathroom. So I said, oh, where's the bathroom? I said, oh, to that door. So I go to the door and I try to open the door. And before I could even put my hand on the door, that damn door opened by itself. And I went, whoa. And then I went inside and the thing closed behind me and there was another door that opened. And then I went through that door and it got to the bathroom. And then after using the bathroom and stuff, I went to wash my hands and the water went on by itself. I didn't have to turn the water on, it went on by itself. And then I wanted to dry my hands and there was nothing to dry my hand, but this blower went on and hot air came out. And I'm going, shit, I don't have to do it. I just stand there and all these electrical things are happening. It's like, wow, talk about waste. You know, so this is an example of how we're depending so much. Now even our cars, right, are going to be electrical. So I don't know when all of this is going to end and how we're not going to be able to survive by actually using manual, your muscles. You know, maybe we don't need hands anymore. I don't know. We don't need feet anymore. I don't know. But that's what worries me. And all I know is we're trying to reestablish an Ahupuaʻa on Molokai. And without my hands and without my feet, we're not going to be able to do it if we just depend on energy. But I know we're going to need energy. And we're trying to figure out how to use energy without using switches and all those kinds of things. And one of my sons, he's really good about alternative energy stuff. When we went to our homestead, we had windmills, but my wife said the thing was too noisy, so we stopped using the windmill. And then we had photovoltaics, but we were growing trees. Like we had to get trees for windbreaks. And before you know it, the trees was blocking out all the sun for the photovoltaics. So we had to figure out all different kinds of ways in order to survive and use these energy systems. So it's a matter of how the hell are we going to survive and what we're going to do in order to do it. And for me, it's going to be learning how not to waste all of these kinds of things that we're creating. I mean, to be able to walk upstairs and go to the bathroom with using your hands is probably one of the ideas that I keep in my mind all the time about how much energy are we going to be needing and how we're going to be using. And when you threaten the island of Molokai by making an energy farm for another island, we know we've crossed the line in how we're looking at energy and how we need to use energy.
Uncle Walter, I feel like, oh, Keani, go ahead, because I jump in.
Oh, okay, if you want to finish that thought, you can finish that thought. I was
No,
just gonna.
please jump
Okay,
in.
I just, want to dovetail off of that idea of waste because, on Molokai, like, we're taught to only take what you need, but in the systems that are, under, this hyper capitalistic system that we're now governed by, the more you use, the more money is made. And so the more it's being designed, not, using founding principles of only use what you need, because it's more designed to continue to extract and to continue to sell and make profits. And so, like with what Uncle Walter is saying, if we're able to redesign this system so that it's not based on using more to make more profits for the monopoly that controls the energy system. And especially on Molokai here, we only need so much, as Uncle Walter is saying. Our peak usage is about 5 megawatts. It's very small. But in talking about equity and distribution, and if it should be a resource, Uncle Walter is on Ho'olehua Homestead, and when my family received its homestead, it didn't have electric going to it. In trying to get electricity to our homestead, it was going to cost about $40,000 for the utility pole, just the utility pole, to get it to our house. And then from there, we would have to pay the monthly service charge. And that's just unaffordable for most of our homesteaders, especially when it makes more sense to just invest that $40,000 into a PV system, and then you're just paying off the PV system instead of paying more, into the pockets of the monopoly that controls it all.
I appreciate you jumping in and what you shared, Keani. Thank you. Uncle Eric, I'm curious if you have thoughts on this topic also, because I welcome hearing your mana'o as well.
In terms of
Well, these ideas about waste and not doing it, and thinking about energy systems and really what is that energy, like what is it feeding? Is it feeding our automatic bathrooms or automatic hand washers? Like, what do we really need all the energy that we're designing our systems for? Or how can we think about energy in a less extractive way and really think about reciprocity in terms of how we're designing those energy systems and what we're using our energy for?
Yeah, and I think if you're thinking about like shelter, it's all about design, the ability for us to build and design our shelters so that there's so much work done in if you're from a hot area, how do you design a home that collects? And if you see like desert people, there's ways that how to collect the air and so there's so much in designing your home, but you have to have the political will to do that. You have to have the interest, and you have to have people who are the architects and the engineers that are from the community that we can borrow from other places around the world, because it's an international problem. Yeah, I mean, the idea that we've taken energy for granted and it's driving us this planet to its slow death. Yeah, so we're gonna have to figure it out, and I think that's why I'm really excited about thinking about the systems approach and design thinking, and having our best minds that come together at small community-based efforts. You know, smaller is better. Microgrids that power up units, and then because it's like if you are involved in the whole process, then you wouldn't waste it. Yeah, like before, if you had to walk, 5 miles to get a gallon of water, boy, that water is precious. Yeah. But now that it's just piped to you, so you can, but it's going to be cost. But anyway, so we have to start thinking and designing and engineering these things: waste, water, shelter, energy, all combined. And that's the kind of systems approach that we really need to this problem, so that we can get the best minds and the best ideas, and then have our youth be part of that process.
I so appreciate you mentioning that component of like, if you go to get the water, you are more invested in how it's utilized. Because one of the things that always strikes me as just like appalling is like Molokai as an island has some of the lowest energy usage across the state. I want to say like actually the lowest, like they use the least amount of energy, but their rate is the highest. And so I often think about, like, behaviorally speaking, what can other islands learn from the way energy is stewarded on Molokai to better inform just how we're using the existing resource. In addition to that, also informing how our new energy system is built as we're moving toward renewable energy. And so I'm curious on anybody's thoughts, really. This isn't directed to a particular person, but how do we advance ecologically and culturally responsible energy? Like, how do we take these lessons that are living in people whose life practice is to be good stewards and help more people understand that approach, and particularly people who are planning and designing and building these systems that we, in many ways, have grown to rely upon? So that's open to any takers.
I'll take a crack at that one. Like this house that I live in right here, they said I needed like double walls to protect me from the cold or from the heat or whatever. So that means I had to put 2 walls in, and I said, well, I can't afford 2 walls. I can barely afford 1 wall. So what I did was, in fact, I couldn't even afford a house. So I decided, well, I'm just going to build my own house. And I had no idea how to build a house, but I watched this bird build this beautiful nest. And I said, shit, if a bird can build one, what the hell can I build one? So of course, on Hawaiian homelands, you're not supposed to do that. But I said, well, I'm a Hawaiian homeland. They cannot kick me off. So I built my own house. And I built a single wall. And when it gets cold, we use double blankets. Sometimes I wear a jacket. When it gets hot, I wear a t-shirt. So I didn't need to build 2 walls. So I also use all natural resources. I use the mangroves for posts, and I build according to traditional design. And I just slap plyboard on and a tin roof on. And I had myself a $25,000 house that my wife designed. So I didn't get any grief at home. And I just used the natural resources. But a lot of this, the point I'm making is what do you want? How much electricity do you want? Do you really want to take the elevator up? Or do you have to, or what? So it goes down back to everybody's individual choices. And a lot of us watch television all the time, and we want what the other guy has, a nicer car or a bigger house or whatever. So a lot of it goes back to the individual. And sometimes we want so much that we're putting too much pressure on our little dots in the middle of the Pacific. And that's really scary. So I just wanted to throw that out there and see how it floats.
think it flowed beautifully, and I appreciate you throwing it out. We actually did get a question from our Facebook audience. And so as we're thinking about like, what do we really want and trying to understand how to build into this future, the question is asking about alignment with Aloha ʻāina economic futures. And if anyone is aligned with their efforts, if you've heard of anything that's been happening that's worth sharing, because the question asker was curious about any progress that has happened in the recent past. Okay, that's all right. We are drawing near to the close of our time.
Rachel,
Yes.
I know we're getting close, but I can try to share a little bit of something so that the person asking the question is left with crickets. So
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, so with the ʻāina aloha futures, ʻāina aloha economic futures, it was all community driven. It was all lahui driven and all, volunteer based. And so I know that they continued meeting and working toward the different policies that were suggested and discussed and developed. The last I spoke with one of the people involved was in October timeframe, and they were still regularly meeting. As far as like coming back to the public and engaging, I haven't heard any updates there. But I know that they did develop this spreadsheet. It's kind of like principles to base your decisions on for elected officials and like legislators and other decision makers. And I thought that was amazing and something that I need to revive in the council and in my own decision making, because I thought that was a great product and outcome of those meetings and that initiative. But I also wanted to just add a little bit to a previous question that you asked, Rachel, regarding, like how do we get there? And I think like what with Uncle Walter and Uncle Eric sharing, it is really it's people power. It's it's on us coming together, and oftentimes it's just a conversation that leads to more conversation that leads to bigger conversation, and then getting people more involved and being committed toward whatever that goal or objective is and seeing it through. Oftentimes, like I know that we don't have the kind of privilege of time and resources. But finding those that are able to prioritize these types of initiatives and this type of work, and then just bringing everyone together, it never underestimate how much you can accomplish together, and it's not working in silos and working together, and just like because like the Molokai Co-op has been working with the Waianae community, as well as I think it's the Kahuku community. And then just hearing about the successes and the small victories that are happening in our homes, and being continually inspired by that. And then reaching out and saying, how can I be involved? How can I help? How can I move this initiative forward? Because this is what I want our future to look like. And so I encourage anyone out there listening to, reach out to, our champions, our kupuna here, and to see how you can help, even if it's a little bit of time, as well as me, Keani.Rawlins@mauicounty.us. If there's policies that I can help to pass that would remove barriers or that would make things easier for our community, I want to hear it, and I want to work with you on that. Mahalo, Rachel.
Mahalo, Keani. Although this question wasn't for me, I will just add that one of the things I think that has been interesting as an outcome from the ʻāina Aloha Economic Futures is a declaration that community members, business leaders, like whomever can sign up to and work toward unity. And I've been privileged to see business leaders and nonprofit leaders actually incorporate that into how they are leading their organizations. So again, thinking about what we can do as individuals, it's lovely to see like this collective effort develop something that we can all attest to and agree to, and then use to inform the decisions that we're making in our respective leadership positions. So as we draw this wonderful panel to a close, I wanted to offer each of you an opportunity to share final thoughts. So I will welcome Keani if you wanted to share, and then I'll go to Uncle Eric and close with Uncle Walter.
Mahalo, Rachel. I think I kind of tied in a little bit of closing thoughts into my last comments. But again, my email address is keani.rollins@mauicounty.us. My gratitude again to the Sierra Club for continuing to have these kinds of conversations that are so necessary for our community in building that unity and in inspiring that hope. Mahalo.
I just I just want to second the motion, and yeah, I really appreciate everybody putting this together. And it's really about community organizing, and it's about alternative energy, but it's about youth power with kupuna ike guidance, and we're gonna figure it out together. It's a kako thing. So mahalo all of you.
Yeah, I second that motion with Eric. Working with the young generation, because the older generation, they're all giving up already. Every time I go Kanemitsu Bakery, they're all sitting down over there every morning at 5:30 in the morning, talking to each other. You guys got to get out there and start working with the young guys, man, before everything falls apart. So working with the young ones is critical, but I really want to close by saying that the Ahupuaʻa, we haven't given enough credence to this way of managing our lands. We've gone away from the Ahupuaʻa. We need to get back to it and find out how that has worked for generations and generations and generations. And hopefully that we're going to find more answers if we start looking at the Ahupuaʻa system. Mahalo.
Hello.
Mahalo, Keani, Uncle Eric, and Uncle Walter. And I feel with all those motions and seconded motions, the motion to look more to our Ahupuaʻa systems management is passed. If I could even say that it's passed as a moderator, we're passing that motion. But folks, it's been a pleasure to spend this time with you all. We are at the end of our panel. Thank you again to the participants for sharing your manaʻo and your time. And thank all of you, audience, for sharing your time with us and your inquiries as well. So while we're not here all week, we will be here tomorrow, and we hope that you'll join us for a grassroots discussion on building local power through community-led and owned energy. We will get to hear about the radical work being done by Hoʻāʻu Energy Cooperative on Molokaʻi, and their work to democratize and localize energy systems to benefit their community, as well as leaders from Waianae Valley and Kahuku who are looking to do the same transformative work for their communities on Oahu. It's been a pleasure serving as your moderator. I'm grateful for the opportunity and honored to spend this time with you all. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, everybody.
Okay.